All right, so there's a couple ways to watercolor an image. Either you can stamp with your permanent ink and then watercolor the image. I don't recommend this as a beginner simply because there's no ridges around it. When you emboss, there's kind of ridges around everything. So if you were to say color this flower, you would either need to color each individual petal separately, or you would need to color this petal, say then this leaf. You'd have to wait until sections were dry before you could color beside it. Case in point, so this one here I painted all the same yesterday, and you'll notice where the dark parts are, it just blended right over the lines, whereas on my embossed version, it stayed within the lines because it had the ridging from the embossing. So the ink stayed where I wanted it to, and it didn't bleed into the next section. Neither one is right or wrong. It's personal preference. And if by chance you like the look of the black outlines and want it embossed, just use black embossing powder. So I'm using these inks that I'm watercoloring with are distress inks. These are the refill inks for the distress ink pads that I am using periodically through this class. So this is the ink to refill the pads of the same color. Obviously I wouldn't be using the pink one to refill the green one, but I have this pink one out because it is one of the colors that I'm using to watercolor with, and I happen to be empty on that. So this particular palette is intended for this. I have a well for each of the colors. I have a little label that I've marked what the colors are, and I've also painted it so I know what the color looks like. The one thing to know about this though is the inks never dry on here, so it has to be stored horizontally. You can't put it vertically to dry. But here is how we are going to watercolor on here. I'll do this little, where's my paper towel? I'm gonna do the little flower right here. So I've got, the first color that I'm using is called Spun Sugar. And I'm doing this as if I was, because this one here they've gone over the lines to blend, I'm gonna do the same with this one. I don't wanna do a different style of painting. So I'm just putting the dark color towards the center of the flower. This brush here has water right in the handle, so when I want to change colors, I just squeeze the water onto the paper towel and my brush is clean and I can go to the next color. So I used Spun Sugar and then Worn Lipstick on the center, and I'm just going to use some Bundled Sage on my leaf. And I typically will end my painting in a section where I want it to be the darkest. If by chance like that one went pretty much all even and I want it to have a bit darker center or towards the base, I'll get a darker color and just do that while it's wet, and it will continue to blend in. So I'm going to leave this one to the side because I want to do the watercoloring, or the rest of the watercoloring on the one with embossing. I find this is much easier for a beginner. Like I said, because you've got the ridges. So if I put dark in one area, it's going to stay in that area and I don't need to worry about it bleeding where I don't want it to go. So I find it kind of get a little tiny bit of insurance, if you will. Now this particular image is very fluid and it's not very precise anyways. And because of that, I'm not trying to paint precise. Oops, I went into the lighter color and I wanted to go into the darker color. If you get a little bit too much like that, just clean your brush off and then just lift it back up and you can lighten it a little bit. Squeeze your brush out when you want to go to a different color. I'm going to do this little yellow flower here. And I'm doing this super quickly. If you want, you can be a lot more precise and do each individual petal separately. But I prefer how it looks when you do it somewhat quickly. I like the fluidity of watercolor. Let's do this little flower here. I mean, like I said, you can even tell the image itself is very loose because there's a leaf right on top of the pet, or right on top of the flower, and the lines from the flower go right through that leaf. So it's not intended to be something that's absolutely perfect, which is great when you're starting out because you can just interpret the different sections to be what you want them to be. And I'll mark down on the supply list all the different colors that I used to do this. But really, the sky's the limit. You can use whatever colors you're wanting. This is a perfect card for, say, an anniversary, say Valentine's Day, a birthday. And it's just a fun one to paint. So I've got 2 leaves overlapping each other there. If I want one to look a little bit different so that you don't lose the other one, I can add a second color of green there. The great thing about this brush with the water in it is if you happen to be a little bit accident prone like I am, you don't have a jar of water sitting there waiting to be knocked over. And I'm nearly done, so I'm not going to stop while my furnace kicked in there. So just a little bit on these little buds, a little bit of dark towards the center, and then a tiny bit of green on the base. And then all I would do from here would be to cut a mat to enhance some of the colors in here. I did a pink, but you could do a green, and then put it on a card base. This particular one, I had some extra space, so I stamped a sentiment there, and I actually twisted it because this particular image, it doesn't really matter which way it goes. But there you go. Simple, easy, watercolored stamped image. See you in the next video.